there was a dense, ancient forest known as the Whispering Woods. Legend spoke of its uncanny silence and the eerie whispers that echoed between the trees after dusk. People avoided it, especially at night. But one brave, or perhaps foolish, girl named Emily decided to explore these woods. Emily was a curious soul, always seeking adventures and mysteries. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, she ventured into the Whispering Woods, armed only with a flashlight and her fearless spirit. As she delved deeper into the woods, the trees seemed to close in around her. The path, barely visible under the moonlight, twisted and turned like a serpent. Suddenly, the forest fell eerily silent. No crickets, no rustling leaves, just silence. Then, as if on cue, a soft whispering began. It was impossible to tell where it was coming from or what it was saying. Feeling a mix of fear and excitement, Emily pressed on. She came across an old, abandoned cabin, its windows shattered and the door hanging off its hinges. The whispers grew louder, urging her to enter. Inside, she found strange symbols scrawled on the walls and an old book lying on a dust-covered table. As she opened the book, the whispers crescendoed into a cacophony of indistinct voices. Suddenly, the door slammed shut, plunging Emily into darkness. The flashlight flickered and died. Panicking, she fumbled for her phone, but it was dead too. The whispers turned into mocking laughter surrounding her, coming from nowhere and everywhere at once. In the pitch-black cabin, Emily felt something brush against her. She screamed and ran, not caring in which direction. She dashed through the woods, branches scratching at her face and arms. She could feel something chasing her, hear its ragged breath just behind her, feel its presence looming over her. After what felt like hours, Emily emerged from the woods, her clothes torn and her body bruised. She collapsed on the ground, sobbing. When she looked back, the forest was silent again, as if nothing had happened. But Emily knew better. She never spoke of what happened that night, and she never set foot in the Whispering Woods again. But sometimes, late at night, she would hear faint whispers outside her window, a chilling reminder of that terrifying night.
Now the second story.
In a small, isolated village surrounded by dense, ancient woods, there lived a curious and brave boy named Lucas. The village elders often told stories of the dark woods, warning of the sinister forces that lurked within. These tales spoke of lost souls, strange creatures, and an eternal darkness that consumed the unwary. Lucas, however, was not deterred. He was drawn to the mystery and allure of the woods. One cold, foggy evening, Lucas, armed with nothing but a small lantern and his courage, ventured into the heart of the dark woods. The trees, twisted and gnarled, seemed to watch him, their branches clawing at the sky. A heavy silence hung in the air, broken only by the crunch of dead leaves under his feet. As Lucas wandered deeper, the forest grew darker, the light from his lantern barely piercing the thick fog that now enveloped him. He came upon an old, overgrown path, barely visible beneath the undergrowth. Compelled by an unseen force, he followed it. The path led him to a clearing where the remnants of an ancient ritual circle lay. In the center stood an altar, its stone stained with age and darker substances. The air around it was colder, and Lucas felt a chill run down his spine. Unseen eyes seemed to watch him from the shadows. Suddenly, the lantern flickered and went out, plunging Lucas into darkness. He heard whispers all around him, voices speaking in a language he couldn't understand. The voices grew louder, turning into a cacophony of sinister laughter and wails of despair. Panicking, Lucas tried to flee, but the forest had changed. The trees seemed to close in on him, their branches entangling, creating a labyrinthine prison. The path had vanished, and with it, any hope of escape. As he stumbled through the woods, desperate to find a way out, he saw figures moving in the shadows. They were neither human nor animal, but twisted, malevolent entities that seemed to materialize from the very darkness of the forest. Their eyes glowed with a malevolent light, and they whispered promises of eternity and power, urging him to join them. Lucas realized these were the lost souls the elders had spoken of, trapped forever in the dark woods, condemned to relive their torment. He tried to ignore them, but their voices filled his mind, drowning out all reason. After what seemed like an eternity, Lucas collapsed, exhausted and helpless. The entities circled around him, their whispers becoming a deafening roar. Just as they closed in, a faint light appeared in the distance. Summoning his last reserves of strength, Lucas ran towards the light. It grew brighter, guiding him out of the dark woods and back to the safety of the village. He emerged at dawn, his face pale and his eyes haunted. Lucas never spoke of what he saw in the dark woods, and he never ventured into them again. But at night, he would wake up to the sound of whispering outside his window, a chilling reminder of the darkness that lurked just beyond the safety of his home.
Now the third story.
In a sleepy, secluded town, nestled between rolling hills and dense forests, there lived a little boy named Ethan. Ethan was a curious child with a wild imagination, often dreaming of adventures and mysteries hidden within the woods bordering his backyard. One gloomy afternoon, with the sky overcast and the wind whispering through the trees, Ethan decided to embark on an adventure. He told his mother he was exploring the backyard, but his true aim was the woods, a place his parents had always warned him about. As Ethan ventured into the forest, the trees seemed to loom over him, their branches intertwining like gnarled fingers above. The further he walked, the more he felt an unsettling stillness enveloping him. The playful chirps of birds and rustling of small animals were conspicuously absent, replaced by a heavy silence that seemed to press down on him. Ethan came across a narrow, winding path he had never seen before. It beckoned him, drawing him further away from the safety of his home. As he walked, he noticed strange symbols carved into the trees, their meanings unknown but deeply unsettling. The path led Ethan to a clearing where an old, decrepit house stood, its windows boarded up, its walls overgrown with ivy. An inexplicable chill ran down his spine as he approached. The air grew colder, and a dense fog began to roll in, obscuring his surroundings. Suddenly, Ethan heard a faint whisper. It seemed to come from the house, calling his name. The whisper turned into a chorus of hushed voices, urging him to come closer. Mesmerized, Ethan found himself walking toward towards the house, each step feeling heavier than the last. As he reached the doorstep, the door creaked open on its own, revealing a dark, musty interior. The whispers grew louder, now echoing all around him. The house seemed to breathe, its walls pulsating slightly, as if alive. Ethan wanted to run, but his feet wouldn't move. He was drawn into the house, each room more dilapidated than the last. All the portraits hung on the walls, their subjects' eyes seeming to follow him. Toys, long forgotten and covered in dust, lay scattered on the floor as if left by a child from another era. In the deepest room of the house, Ethan found a mirror. But his reflection was not his own. Instead, he saw a ghostly figure, a boy much like himself, but with hollow eyes and a sorrowful expression. The figure reached out, its hand pressing against the glass, and Ethan felt an icy grip on his heart. Terrified, Ethan ran from the house, the whispers turning into screams behind him. The forest seemed to close in, the trees bending unnaturally towards him, as if trying to trap him. In a panic, he lost the path and found himself hopelessly disoriented. Just as despair began to set in, Ethan saw a light. His parents, frantic with worry, had come searching for him. They found him trembling at the edge of the woods, eyes wide with fear. Ethan never spoke of what he saw in the house, but he never ventured into the woods again. Yet, sometimes, late at night, he would hear whispers outside his window, and in the corner of his room, he would see the faint outline of a boy watching him from the shadows.
Now the fourth story.
In the heart of a forgotten countryside, shrouded in legends and whispered fears, lay the eldritch forest. It was a place that locals spoke of in hushed tones, warning their children to never wander near its borders. Yet, for a young woman named Clara, the forest's infamous reputation only fueled her fascination. Clara was a fearless and inquisitive soul, with a thirst for the unknown that overshadowed any sense of caution. One autumn evening, under a crescent moon, she decided to explore the depths of Eldritch Forest, armed with nothing but a lantern and her unwavering curiosity. As Clara ventured deeper, the forest seemed to shift and change around her. The trees, gnarled and ancient, formed twisted shapes, and shadows danced in the corners of her eyes. An unnatural fog began to rise, swallowing the path behind her, making retreat impossible. The air grew colder, and a suffocating silence enveloped her. The usual sounds of wildlife were eerily absent. Instead, there were whispers, faint and unintelligible, as if the trees themselves were speaking in a forgotten language. Clara's heart raced, but she pressed on, drawn by an inexplicable force deeper into the heart of the forest. In a clearing, she found an old well, its stones covered in moss and strange, runic carvings. As she approached, the whispers grew louder, now echoing from the depths of the well. Against her better judgment, Clara peered inside. In the darkness below, she saw flickering lights, like the eyes of something watching her. Suddenly, a cold hand grasped her shoulder. She screamed and turned, but there was nothing there, only the dense, suffocating trees. Panicked, Clara ran, her lantern casting long, distorted shadows that seemed to chase her. As she fled, the forest came alive with nightmarish visions. Ghostly apparitions floated between the trees, their faces twisted in silent screams. The ground beneath her feet seemed to undulate, and the trees bled a dark, viscous substance. The whispers turned into screams, filling her ears with a cacophony of terror. Clara stumbled upon an old, decrepit mansion, its walls crumbling and overtaken by the forest. Desperate for shelter, she entered, only to find the interior warped and changing, like a living, breathing entity. The corridors twisted endlessly, and the rooms were filled with antique mirrors that reflected distorted, horrifying versions of herself. In one room, she found a diary, its pages filled with the ramblings of a madman, speaking of a curse and a creature that dwelt in the heart of the forest. As she read, the walls began to close in on her, and the mirrors shattered, their shards levitating and pointing at her like accusing fingers. Clara ran from the mansion, her mind teetering on the edge of madness. She found herself back at the well, where the whispers coalesced into a voice, offering her a way out in exchange for something precious. With no other option, Clara agreed. The forest guided her back to the edge, where she emerged under the light of dawn. But as she left, she realized the price of her escape. Her shadows remained in the forest, and with them, a part of her soul. Clara returned to her village, a shell of her former self. She never spoke of what happened in the eldritch forest, but at night, she would hear the whispers, and in the darkness of her room, she noticed the absence of her shadow, a constant reminder of the horrors that lurked within the forest. And so, the eldritch forest remains a place of nightmares, waiting for the next unwary soul to venture into its depths.